Some of you may remember me from my first teaching here. Please, no autographs till afterward. There's going to be moments where you're like, yeah, that's a miniature David right there. And you know what? I'm all here for it. Alrighty. How's everybody doing? Doing good? Feeling comfortable? You here to relax? Thank you, yes. Because I was hoping some of you might raise your hand. Want you to do something with me real quick. Dennis, I feel like I'm coming in hot, but if you guys don't think so, that's okay. All right. I want everybody to take one shoe. I want you to take a shoe. All right, in this shoe, I want you to put, first of all, who feels uncomfortable? Thank you. All right. Second of all, who does not have their shoe yet? All righty. I'll remember you, don't worry. I want you to put in this shoe relaxation and comfort. I'll tell you what. This is going to be more fun for me than it will for you. That's okay. I want you to take this shoe, and I want you to put in here, you can get them afterward too, but you don't know that yet. I want you to put fear and your cares of the world in this shoe, and also toss that one aside. In my thought of that, I had the verse come to me, and I don't want to just take scripture out of context and say, this is exactly what it meant. But to me, I had a moment in that where I was like, stop, don't approach. Jonathan, do not come near, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. Remove your shoes. You can put them back on if you want. Who's willing to get uncomfortable with me? All right. If you're not willing to get uncomfortable, I say this in jest, but also in full earnesty, you might want to leave. You might want to leave. And there's a big reason for that I'm not going to tell you yet. I was not the first one here today. I don't know who thinks that they were the first one here today, but there was somebody else before everybody was here. And I think last night, if I can paint a picture for you, I think last night there was a group that came in here and constructed something. And I would bet to say it's right up here, I believe. And as the angels were constructing the throne room chair, God said, no, a little to the left, a little to the right. But I want you all to know that the Father is sitting here, and he's sitting right there. So with that, take your mind, take your perception, take your perspective, take what you think, your comforts, your cares, and as David Schwartz likes to say, let's put it on the table. And I'll tell you what, it's really hard to do, and it'll get harder as we go through. I pray. And I'll explain why later. Title for today is Questions, the Curious Nature, and the King of the Universe. I don't have slides today. And you know why? Because slides they're a way to disconnect from me looking at you while I'm looking at you, and I intend to look at you. You have nothing to look at here except me. And that's not comfortable for anybody. At least I hope not. It won't be comfortable for me, and the more I look at you, Johnny, I gotta try not to look at you because I'm comfortable looking at you. Who am I not comfortable? Ali, put your hand down. Okay, yeah, but so here's the thing. In my thought, when I was hit with this idea, I don't have the studious nature of David Schwartz. I don't have the insights like my father. But the thing that always sticks with me is a practical sense of what do I take away from this. The things that have changed my life are the things that should change my life. The things that stick with me. They're the practical, they're the here and now. And over the past almost a year now since I've not been coming here consistently, since I moved out to Minnesota, my perspective has been challenged in a lot of different ways. And I had to grow a lot from that. So if there's one thing I can provide you an opportunity to have, is a different perspective. And if that is uncomfortable, good. I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care. As John Ramirez says, I don't care if you don't like me as long as you make heaven. I don't care. Does anybody have any questions? I love that. Why not? I have questions. I have a lot of questions. And the more life goes on, the more I keep having questions. Who likes being uncomfortable? I felt Father calling me to talk about questions. But my basic point for this is to ask questions. And I'm going to prayerfully convict every single person in here to ask questions. Can I ask a question? Yes? All right. Who here likes talking about racism? Oh, it just got deep. Anybody else just feel the heat go up a couple notches? It's not a comfortable topic for me because there's a lot that involves around that. But for me, I'm going to give you the story, an example. This is just going to be a lot of stories about my life, in case you wanted to know. My cast of characters out in Minnesota are me, another white guy, a black American, and a Persian American. And the projects that we're working on, some of the documentaries deal with that question of racism and things that have been done in the past. This is hard for me, having gone out there, because I grew up around mostly people that looked like me, but the people that I had interactions with everybody, was not a hateful experience. There was no malice in my heart toward anybody that looked like me or not like me. That's the perspective that I went out there with. And then I come into this group, this cast of characters, who have had different experiences than me. And that's challenging me because they have felt hatred from other people that don't look like them. And I had to realize I had my own hill to die on that said there is perceived hatred, a lot of hatred toward the people that look like me. But there's all these people, and there are some that are bad. The problem with this perspective is that there's a lot of us, and some of us are extreme, but that's not most of us, is that I was not giving grace to the other side of that equation. I looked at that and got defensive here, saying, looking at the same stuff that they looked at, looking at the media that told me other people felt that way about me, when I had to realize other people have experiences. There's a lot of them, just to generally use the term, but it's not there's a lot of them and some of them are good. No, most of them just are human beings. And then there are some that are hateful, as it is with everything. But that was a huge moment for me. It was a huge moment for me because I honestly had to consider that, because I realized ignorantly that I had built up a resentment or a resistance toward other ethnic groups because I didn't have that experience that they had. That's perspective, though. To say, most people just want to be people. Most people want to live their lives. And we can relate to people from that. There are those that spin that truth to look that way. It's on all of us to treat our fellow man the way we want to be treated, and to look at our fellow man the way we want them to look at us. There's a lot of love that has to come from that. Am I saying everything that I agree with everything in their perspective now? No. But I'm saying this was a huge deal for me to be able to relate to them on the issues that were important to them. because I had a different perspective. I believe that a better human, somebody who wants to be better, is somebody who can relate and listen to other people's perspectives. But all of that was born from a question, and I I had to ask my coworker, who's also Caucasian, because I didn't want to seem offensive by going out. But that was a really hard conversation. But I also knew if I didn't ask that question, I was going to keep going on feeling like they had hatred toward people who look like me. And if that was not the case, I wanted to know it. Because I don't think that they're hateful. I don't think that they had hate, but they have experiences with people that have felt that way. So most of the media is trying to paint that picture that most of us on both sides of those groups hate each other. But that's not true, and that's what causes division. And that was this perspective that I came from, is that they saw me this way. They saw my group this way. And that was just a good one. That was wrong, though. They're not like that. It's the middleman. Questions are the foundation for growth, and it's really interesting. I had not put my finger on that for quite a while. Ellie, how many questions have you asked your dad today? Your silence is very telling. But why, though? But why? There's the next question is why. Your dad knows a lot more than you do, right? Yes, say it again. But it's a funny thing. It's a funny thing. Because my dad still has questions about a lot of things. And I've talked to my grandpa. My grandpa still has a lot of questions about a lot of things. My grandpa does not need much. And he knows that. And if there's one thing I know about my grandpa, is that he's a saved man. And when he wakes on in the first resurrection to greet the Jesus that he's known his entire life, that's going to be a great moment. And I want to be there to see that. But he still has questions. So why don't we? A month before I left for Minnesota, I told Josiah I asked him if he had any questions. I asked him, and I said that a couple different times. And it's not because I thought I knew so much, or had so much wisdom or knowledge to share, but it was that I had questions at his age. I had questions, and I didn't ask them. And actually, a lot of the time, I didn't ask the right people. I didn't ask the right things. But I am a guy who likes to know things. I want to be able to put my hand on something. I want to be able to understand something. There are right and wrong things to know, and every person is multifaceted, and there's a lot that I know about all of you, and a lot that I don't know about all of you. In connection with this, in trying to think about questions and trying to think about a person I want to become and the ways in which I don't want to be, I had some questions. And I had to call up some people to ask some questions about some of the men in my life. So I called Mom. I had some questions about Dad. She told me some very interesting things. And now I know some things. I called up Christy Bovey one day, and I had some Anybody feeling uncomfortable yet? I had some questions about Johnny. I respect him, but I also know there's a lot that I don't know. She has some really interesting things to say, Johnny. I also called up the elders of the group because I look up to Mr. Schwartz, but I wanted to know what others around him saw about him. And I got some answers, very interesting things. And I also called up Mrs. Palmer to ask her some questions about Mr. Palmer because I want to know the family and the people that I'm going to look up to. And I also got some interesting answers. For the sake of goodwill, I didn't want to just share everything without these guys knowing, so I'd like to have my dad, Johnny, David, and Todd come up, please. Because in these boxes, I put the things that I know, the answers that I got, and I think I'd like to talk about them later, but Dad, I put things I know about you in there, Johnny, David, and Todd. If you are all willing to reach in and find the answers. Yeah? Anybody find anything? All right, you guys can take your hands out. I actually don't have anything in there. It's paper towel right there. Don't touch me with that. I didn't actually put anything in there, and I actually didn't ask those people anything. Now, thank you for the willing participants, by the way. I set it up this way intentionally, because I do have a question for those four guys. Why did you put your hands in the box? Because you're good at sports. Dad said because he trusted me, which it's funny. But here's where this came into mind with me. Does anybody know the story of Pandora's box? Anybody know that example where it's the box that you don't know what's in, and that curiosity drives you insane till you have to figure it out? I think there's an inherent danger about asking questions. That's why we typically avoid the hard ones. The problem is that we're still asking them. It doesn't matter if we don't ask them out loud. You'll either ask the right people or the wrong people the right questions or the wrong questions. Talking now about our curious nature, there was once upon a time a voice that said, "Did he really say that? Are you really gonna die?" Because he knows if you do it, you'll be just like him. He wasn't playing on information that they knew. I believe that our curious nature is put in us from God. That's a God-given thing. The problem is that we are weak human beings, every single one of us, and our human nature and our evil nature plays on that curious nature wrongfully. Has anybody else ever thought about the fact that Eve didn't go to Adam to ask him about what the serpent was saying might have not been true? Or the fact that neither one of them went to the Father to ask him? That's telling of human nature. The way I see trust and faith is that if trust is quickly broken off of little pieces of information that you did not know, it wasn't trust. It's not just, "Oh, I didn't know that person. How could he do that?" No, that wasn't trust. I like to call this the knowledge card. And it's the idea that A and B have talked. A and B talked. And B goes and talks to C and says, "A said this." Well, C knows A, and C says, "Well, I don't see how A could do that or could say that." Well, A has told you this, but I heard this from A. So in the power play of a conversation, in that dynamic, you're playing on the fact that this person cannot refute this person's information because this person heard something from this person that they didn't say. So they can't tell this person no about this person. And too often, that breaks trust here so quickly. It's not even funny. I've seen that happen way too many times where I know this person, but they said, well, yeah, but I heard them say this. I heard them say this. Wait, but they told me this, so they clearly have a problem. And the problem with humans is that we tend to immediately take that and we either dwell on that, we sit on that, chew on it, think about it until it just grows in our own mind, or we go to that person and say, hey, I heard you did this. Where did that come from? Well, it comes from a third party who got in the middle of your two relationship. That's the knowledge card. Every day we wake up, we have the knowledge card in our hand, and we can play that on different people multiple times throughout the day. It's stupid, but it's human nature. It happened, the very first action that caused evil was the knowledge card. Was this, is that really what he said? Because he actually knows something that you don't know. So he was the liar. Did Yahweh tell them what evil was? No, because they didn't need to know. To me, it's a question of impulse versus instinct. And I think this is the one thing that I've been learning biggest over the last year is this idea of impulse versus instinct. Because instinct is, there's a certain amount of instinct that is indwelt, but instinct is also honed over time. Whether it's a good or bad instinct is how you have trained it to be. Nobody wakes up and says, I just have an instinct to go to Taco Bell at 2 in the morning. Nobody has an instinct to go to Taco Bell. You have an impulse to go to Taco Bell. There's a difference there. And human nature and how we have trained our brains to think and to react will dictate which one of those kicks in, either instinct or impulse. The unfortunate fact of human nature is that we tend to act on the impulsive nature of a secret. And that's what I tried to set up with this. I tried to set up the idea, it's not the fact of what people knew about these four guys that would draw them up here, that would make them stick their hand in to find out. It's the secret nature. It's the idea of, I don't want something to be known about me, and I don't know what he has to know about me, so I've got to find out what it is. I've got to find out what's being kept from me, just in case I need to keep that a secret. Right? Can everybody relate to that? I feel like I should see more hands, but okay. Can I ask another question? Y'all are probably, there's like 2 people nodding their heads now. Y'all here to be comfortable? You're here to be comfortable? Okay, cool. Because you were all still here, and I told you, I gave you fair warning if you weren't comfortable, you could leave. The only reason I bring this up as a precursor is because it's very relatable to human life and human nature and all the conversations that every one of us has either had or going to have. Who's had the talk with their kids? Ooh, yeah. Uh-huh. Why is this a touchy subject? Because we'd rather keep that area of our life and the things that we think about it and the ways that we deal with that a secret. It's not something that we're proud of to bring to open light. And I want to talk to both the kids and the parents, not because I am a parent, but if I have anything to share, either from my perspective about having been a kid or things that I've seen from other parents. We're all humans, right? We all deal with all feelings and all emotions. That's what it means to be a whole human being. So, to the kids or the people who don't have kids out in the audience, immature beings have to be able to ask questions inside safe environments that they have. Otherwise, they'll ask them outside. Who has one of these? Yeah? This is not your friend. This is not your friend. This is a tool. It is not your friend. But it will open itself to you as a friend. This will tell you, and it's not just this, I believe it's fear. I believe a really interesting phrase came to me about 2 years ago. And I think it was the Alme moment where he told me, fear plays every side. Can we all just agree that we have had those feelings before? Had those emotions of that you gain in adolescence as your body starts to grow, right? Hormones, chemicals, all of that stuff. We all have had that. That's why this is relatable. And it's uncomfortable. That's why we're talking about it. Fear plays every side. Fear will tell you, when you have those thoughts as a kid, you think, this is new, this is uncomfortable, I can't tell anybody that. And fear will play this side and say, you can find it this way without telling anybody. So you don't have to be ashamed. Fear gets you on that side. And then when and if you do, then you feel caught and you feel trapped and you're like, well, now you can't tell anybody else because you're gonna feel ashamed. That's fear. Fear got you on the other side. It's this weird thing where if you play with fear, fear is gonna find a way to play you every single side, every single way. I'm historically a guy who likes to learn from experience. And do you ever realize that's not something you say when it's a good thing? Most of the time, when you have an experience and you learn something and you grew and it was like a big thing, you're like, yes, I learned that. But when it's like you made a mistake, you're like, I'm a learn from experience kind of guy. Well, you could have learned that lesson from somebody else because you got told that a year ago, 2 years, 10 years ago, and it just doesn't sink in, unfortunately. Anybody here have a parent? Hey, now we got some hands in the group. All right. Victor, when was the last time you asked your parent a question that really mattered to you? See, that's funny. It's not something we think about. Who else's parents are still alive right now? Laura, when was the last time you asked your parents a question that really mattered to you? Last week? Amen. Amen. Because there are people that know things. There are people in which, and it's going to be your family, where you have the safest environment to ask things. Those people that you see as your family, that you have congregated as your family, those are the environments that you want to ask things because you want to grow, and you want to grow with the people that are not going to lead you astray. This is why this is such a big deal to me. Because as a father sitting right here, if I have the chance to be uncomfortable, I have the chance to grow right now before the Father and before the body of Messiah. What other time of the week can I say that? I have that chance. And if I don't ask questions now, am I going to ask them to my phone tomorrow? Am I going to ask them to my boss or my coworkers? It's not going to be the same. I could have asked my dad 1,000 different things while I was living at home. And thankfully, I still have that chance. And I need to utilize that more because my dad knows a lot. But as a kid, my dad was there for me, and I didn't utilize that enough as a kid. It's something that I've thought about a lot. If you're going to be thinking about something, and as an adolescent, flowering child, if you're going to be thinking about that stuff, you need to talk to someone who can lead you right. But with that being said, how parents react to this is going to define what the kid feels they can talk to you and bring to you in the future. We'll get to that later. But to all of my peers and those younger than me, I would say it's a process to get to know yourself and to get to learn how you think and the things that you deal with. But you have to get to know yourself. I know that on Sabbath and Sundays, I have 24/7 access to my brain. My brain has 24/7 access to me because I'm just in my apartment in Minnesota. And that's not usually a great recipe for success because I have way too much time to think about way too much. So anytime that I can, in my attempt to try to know myself, I try to get out of my apartment, go do something useful, productive. This is one reason why I go to the gym every day, because it's putting my time into something productive and keeping myself out of something that's not. Is it my apartment's fault? No. I have a curious nature. I have too many questions, and I have too many voices that can whisper in my head. Way too many. But that's all of us. That's not unique to me. But that's all of us. But we got to know ourselves so that we don't let this. I honestly, I really like the example of the little angel and the devil on the shoulder. I find it probably looks weird on the whole because I'm talking to myself, but I talk from a couple different voices in my head to try to discern things and figure things out. And a lot of it's, I'm doing something or thinking about doing something, and then I'll say to myself, Ben, what are you doing? Come on, man. Like, you know you shouldn't. I'm like, I know. The problem is that I have this voice too. I just usually try not to let him talk out loud through here because it's never good. It's just not good. If anybody else know what that's like? All right, cool. So all of my parents out there, a safe environment must be provided. All right, I'm not a parent, but can I share with you something that I have learned from a kid's perspective and something that I have seen, things that I have seen from other parents? Is that okay if I share with you? Are you willing to not just accept my word as gospel, but to take this and discern for yourself with the Spirit, with the Holy Father right here judging you, to take that and try to discern the truth? Is that okay? Alrighty. That's probably the scariest part about thinking about being a parent. It's not having kids. It's the idea I am going to have to provide a safe place for them to be able to grow. That's an inspiring thing, and it's a daunting thing. Just because to create an environment where they can feel that they can share without degradation. And that's not to say this should not be led in discernment and truth, but without degradation. The verse that came to me that when I was thinking about this was 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 13, that passage where it ends in saying, there's no new temptation. There's no temptation that's new to man. We're all going to deal with things. The scary part about being an adult or being a parent is realizing I am forever and always now going to be in my head. I remember being 5 years old, and I remember being 25 years old. The difference is that the similarities was that it was me the whole time. Where I would see other people in life this year, and then 3 years later I'd see them again. Wow, you changed, you're so different. Well, yes, and I did the same thing, but it was me the whole time. I am forever and always going to be here. But at some point, I'm going to have somebody who's going to look up to me, and I probably do right now, have other people that look up to me who aren't in here, and who I have to be able to give some kind of covering for their protection, to provide an environment where they can know and learn what they need to know and learn, because we're all learning and growing. And that's kind of a scary thought, if you think about it. I think kids want to bring things to you, to the parents. They want to bring things to you. The problem is that they also know you. It doesn't stop a kid from asking questions. It just means if a kid is going down a wrong path and they're in the environment, I think this is one of the best environments. I'm going to start it by saying that. You guys are some of the best parents, best people that I know. But I think it's funny because as a kid, I had the greatest litmus test for a dad who was there for me and who I knew if I brought things to my dad, he was not going to yell at me. He was not going to shame me or degrade me. My dad set himself up in a manner of respect, and I wanted my dad's respect. So when I started dealing with things and going down rabbit holes, I ended up feeling afraid to bring things to my dad, not because of how he was going to react, but because I didn't want to lose his respect. But in the end, that got to a point where I did bring some stuff to my dad because I needed to get out of it. I needed to get off my chest. And I would rather be uncomfortable and learn and grow, gain a new perspective and become stronger and better as a human being than get stuck in my own fear, get stuck in my own self, and slowly lose the respect of the people that I love and that I care. Over the past year and a half, I gotta tell you, I have just stopped caring. Like there was so much freedom when I was finally able to say, yeah, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care how some random person feels about me. I don't care if they don't like the way that I dress, if I feel like I am dressing appropriately. I don't care. I have enough people in my life that I do care about, whose opinions and trust and respect and honor that I do care about. I have enough of those people that I do care about to not care about the rest. I just don't care. And that's been freeing for me. And like the faith aspect that came along with that, to be able to grow in Yahweh, even to say, if something happens that I do lose the respect of that isn't going to shake my faith anymore. Something, tragic things could happen now, and I'm going to feel those very really, but that's not going to shake my faith anymore. So I've had those moments. I had those moments where my faith did get shaken, and I had to work through those, and some of those took years. But once you get past that, you get to stand on a rock that's not going to move anymore. It's a really, really cool thing. And unfortunately, that comes through hard times. That has to happen. Everybody has to. It's a hard thing to think about Josiah getting his heart broken one day, because I hate for him to have to go through that, because I've been there. But he's not going to be able to know that kind of strength and know that kind of security and peace that Yahweh can give through those situations until that happens. But what I can provide for Josiah is a place to say, bro, if that ever happens, and when it does happen, I got your back. You got me 100%. You never have to be afraid to call me up, talk to me. And you got mom and dad too, first of all. So I'm not even... Anybody uncomfortable still? My brothers both said, yeah. Here's a really interesting that I've realized too. And this is born out of parents that I've seen, and it's also born out of my thought of being a parent one day. I think kids need to see their parents apologize to each other. That's not comfortable. That's not comfortable. Because as a person, I think, you don't want to see people see you as a weak person. Or see that you have to admit that you messed up, right? That's not comfortable. To your kids, least of all. But the problem is that the other side of that is, okay, so story. There was a time in our family where we had a lot going on in our family. And it was really hard on our family. And I could see it wearing on mom and dad. And it was hard for me to watch as a kid, knowing that I could only do so much. But there were times even in there where they would have conflict and then separate, and then I didn't get to see the aftermath of that. And I remember going to mom one time and saying, Mom, is everything okay? Because I see you guys fighting and not fighting. I see you guys arguing, and I don't see the resolution. And Mom was like, oh my goodness. Your dad and I believe very firmly in to not let the sun go down on your anger. We deal with everything. We come back together at the end of every night if there's something still unresolved. But I didn't get to see that. And that was a huge thing for me. That was a huge weight off my chest, especially during that time when there was already a lot going on that we couldn't just, fix. But that was huge for me. And the other side of that, though, is I've also seen toxic people's stance on conflict resolution, because conflict resolution is going to happen one way or the other, but you can either deal with it and become a stronger team, become a stronger unit, friendship, bond, connection, or you can just ignore that. And we've also had people in our lives that there was a person that hurt my sister and then ignored that she existed for multiple years. And then when that came back around, she pretended like nothing was wrong, like nothing had ever happened. And that bugged me so bad because that, well, for one, that was my sister. But then I was also like, yeah, I never want to do that ever. I would rather deal with things. I would rather talk about things right now. And it's not, in everybody's conflict resolution needs to, well, let's talk about something right now. There is, I think, the more I listen to things, there needs to be space for every person's need to get ready to deal with conflict. Whether that's space or that's dealing with it right now. But it's got to happen. I've seen toxic people's conflict resolution as ignoring and then coming back. And how many people know that when you ignore and you bury and you bury and you bury and you ignore and things keep happening and never gets dealt with, how many people have been there where it just, what happens? Is anyone willing to admit that they've been there before or that they've done that before? That's a hard one. That's a really hard one. It's interesting now how quiet we all are because not long ago we were singing and praising Yahweh very loudly. And now when it comes to admittance, it's like way heavier. I think that admittance is also praising the Father. Not just haphazardly, in front of the right people. There's still an order and a place for that, for admitting where you fall. So when I bring up all this, I don't need to hear everybody's problems. All right? I can't deal with everybody's problems. Nobody can deal with everybody's problems. But we have to find the spaces where we can talk about these things, where they can be talked about correctly and in the right groups, where they can be dealt with and not just spiraled down and down and down. I've also seen people who wanted to do nothing but talk about their problems, and that's a spiral that just goes down and down and down. And that's unfortunate because you're like, I want you to find help, but you don't want to find help. If there's not a sacred, safe place before the body, the literal throne of God, where else can we admit these things? Where else can these things be dealt with and talked with? Because if there's not a comfort here, there's a lot less comfort in front of your family, in front of your spouse, unless you are setting yourself up that way. But this is the body of Messiah, guys. These are the people that we're going to be spending eternity with, praising the Father. This is cool. This is a cool environment. I think we all have those nobody can know things. But I know for myself, I've had to admit those. I've had to see it, admit it, and set up guards against it. See it, admit it, set up guards against it. You're not going to set up a guard against it if you can't admit it's a problem. And you can't admit it's a problem if you don't see it's a problem. I have a lot of respect for you guys, for Christy and Johnny Bovey, for you guys sharing your testimony a couple Shavuots ago. Because if there was any case in point of a story that you don't want anybody else to know, it's that. But that's your guys' testimony. And how many people now feel comfortable to share their story and know that there are people that they can relate to who have moved on and become better. I think that's the difference between something like this and like an AA group where people are all dealing with the same problem. What about the people who are, I dealt with this problem and now I'm not? That's the kind of cool connection. And I think we have that ability here with the Father, because there's nobody that's going to be your worst judge, and there's nobody that's going to be the best love for you. I was listening to Jordan Peterson and Dennis Prager go back and forth on this idea that modern culture wants to get rid of the ideal. For example, the ideal of beauty. The ideal of beauty is something up here, and it's great and it's awesome, but the problem with an ideal is that it also creates the inherent judge of those that don't match up to the ideal. That's a hard place to be. That's a hard thing to admit to, but I think we are all here Because for one, this is Sabbath, people. This is Sabbath. He asked us to be here. But we also are here for being uncomfortable. We're here for discomfort. I like relaxing on Sabbath as much as anybody else. And I'm not going to say that I never get distracted on Sabbath. I had the thought 2 Sabbaths ago. I was like, I give 9 to 10 hours a day to my employer, and I can't give 8 hours a day to Yahweh, 1 day a week. So I tried to sit out on my roof for 8 hours. I did not get there. I got maybe 3 with a couple runs back in. But to me, it was that idea of like, I want this discomfort in my life if I get to grow. I want my perspective to be challenged if I get to grow. If I get to find another way to love somebody else, or to be a word, or to be an example to somebody else, I will take the knife and carve out that discomfort myself. And it's not easy. And it's not something I think about every day, because I usually don't want to think about it. That's human nature. But here before the throne, before the body, I'm asking you all to think about it. How have you fallen short? Who do you need to go to admit to? Like, honestly, I need to ask my family, like, what the things that I need to work on, the things that they have seen in me over time as characters, because that's going to be put on somebody else eventually. Cassie and I spend a lot of time talking to each other. The things that are wrong with me are going to come out on her if I'm not careful. To be careful about my own human nature. Just to think about it. I want to encourage you with this, though. We must ask the Father questions and grow through hard experiences to grow our faith. But like I said, trust that immediately folds is not trust. It's not faith. I had a former friend that I had a conversation with who had turned atheist. And he was like, watch this video. And so I watched this video, and it was basically saying, dear believer, why yours? Out of all the religions out there, why yours? And I was like, okay, I'm not going to immediately say, man, he's got a pretty good point. So I was like, I know the God that I know. I know the relationship he has given me. Because I don't get to let God do anything. I don't get to make God do anything. He's given me this opportunity. And it's funny to the people, to the people who say, you believe in God? And I was more like, well, it's more like God believes in me. Because I don't know why that one is. That's the bigger question to me. Why God believes in me. But he does, so I'm here for it. But I think we all need to go through those questions, signs of questioning, and those hard experiences. I've realized I wouldn't trade anything that I've been through in my life before, but I gotta tell you, my 13 to 21, I was a stupid kid. And the more that I look at kids those age, the more I'm like, just shut up. When they're talking about their problems and talking about all these things, and I'm like these questions that they have and the things that like how world this is disintegrating in front of them, I'm like, wait till you turn 25, okay? Because I had questions at 17, and the world was going to end when I was 17. And then I turned 19, and I was like, man, I was a dummy back then. And then I turned 21, and I was like, oh, wow, I knew nothing at 19. And then I said the same thing at 21 and 23, and here I'm 25, and I'm like, if I know anything, I hope I can just know that 2 years from now, I'm going to know more than I know now. And I want to stop acting like I know everything now. I'm gonna put my foot down on the things that I do know and hold to the faith and the God that I do know, because he's bigger than me anyway. I'm not denying the foundation that I've built in 25 years of life, and I hopefully more in experience. But I also know Johnny knows way more than me. And Johnny is a really secure man in his faith. I've respected you for a long time. I've respected several men in this room for a long time. And I just get to know that if I can hold on to this faith now, when I get to that point, oh, dude, nothing's going to move me. And I just get to keep growing and expanding, and that's so cool. So I'm like, to all the 25-year-olds or younger, I'm like, just hold on. Just wait, just don't go to extremes. There's so many kids that have mental health epidemic, and I'm not saying it's not a problem, but I'm saying if you just wait and just wait to figure things out and not just get stuck in your own head, things will probably work themselves out. It's kind of a funny thought. All right, I have just a couple more stories to tell you. I know it's already 5:30, but I did want to set the mood for this because this is why this matters. Because here's the basic question. Why are you all here? I know I'm here. And in light of perspective, I want to make you aware of another reason why you're here, whether you knew it or not. I have faith in all of you that you will know why. First of all, you know why now, but I want to give you another reason to know why. First of all, this song is Awesome God, which means a lot to me because Sukkot after Sukkot after Sukkot, we would be praising the Father to this song. And so I found this version, I was like, because this is like my jam, this kind of deep, thoughtful, cinematic tones. We're here for a reason, guys. And there's a bigger reason. And there's a bigger perspective on Yahweh. So, about a month and a half ago, there was a Rev Shabbat I was preparing for. It's Friday night after work, sitting down, preparing supper, just happy that it's going to be Sabbath. And I got a chance to get out of my world and have Sabbath again. And I heard a knocking. And I was like, this is weird. My family's never been here. I don't have any friends out in Minnesota besides my coworkers, and they don't have the door code. So I was like, who's knocking? And I knew it was weird too because it wasn't on my door. It was on my window. So I went to my window and I opened it up. And there was the King of the universe. I said, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? He said, it's Sabbath. It's Sabbath. I said, I know, but you could be opening Sabbath with whales. You could be opening it with stars. You could be with the missionaries that are out in the field actually spreading your name. You could be with the children who are crying your praises even though they have nothing to eat. Why are you in nowhere, Minnesota? At my door, no less. Because it was a bad week. I had struggled a lot that week, and I was not winning. I was not winning. But he just leaned down and he said, it's Sabbath. I want to spend time with you. Do you want to spend time with me? And I was like, yeah. Can I come in? Yeah, please. That changed that Sabbath, and I pray every other Sabbath for the rest of my life. Does anybody else realize God didn't need us? He could have created things and left us to our own devices. He had full right to. But his son is right there. And he's sitting watching us saying, hey, I wanted to spend time with you. And I'm comfortable being uncomfortable because I get to spend time with him. And this Sabbath, I got the chance to lead all of you to spend time with him too. This wasn't a scripture-heavy teaching, but to me, it's just life. It's just life. We've all got to live life. And these are things that I've realized in life. I don't typically like the term sinner saved by grace because it denies the identity that I'm supposed to have. Now, there are times I need to remember that I am just a sinner saved by grace. But when I get out of those times, I need to stop thinking like that, because Yeshua didn't come give his life for the salvation of the world for me to just be a sinner. Saved by grace, but just be a sinner. He came so that I could be a child of the King, so that I could be a warrior for the King, so that I could be a missionary, so that I could be not a sinner. And I know that I am that because of something that happened back in 2017, which is, far too late for this to actually be happening, but thankfully, still got to happen. So back in 2017, we were at Sukkot, and it was a huge gathering, probably the biggest we've been to. Multiple hundreds of people. I liked a girl, and this is a family that we had a good relationship with. We loved their family, and I had talked to her mom and said, "Hey, I like your daughter. How do I approach that?" She said, "Talk to her." Like, okay. So I talked to her that year at Sukkot, and she expressed interest back, and we had a fantastic time. I was a senior, of all things, and they were leaving a day or two early. I went out to say goodbye to them, and as they were leaving, something just struck me, like life just changed forever. I don't know if I can deal with that. And I was like, okay. But as I turned around, I looked up at the building hall where 300 people were singing the praises of Yahweh. And I saw the King of the universe sitting on top of that building. And he said, "Come here, man. I want to spend time with you." I said, "I can't. I'm not worthy. So if you want me to come, if you want me to live this out, you have to tell me that I'm worthy." And in total cool nature, I saw him say, "You're worthy." And ever since then, I've been on the worst roller coaster of my life in terms of heartache, because that girl broke my heart. I was an immature kid, but I was trying to learn, and she ripped me to shreds. A year later, right after the next year's Sukkot, I started talking with another girl, and she had problems, and I could be there for her, and all these things happened, and it ended horribly. And it broke my heart again. And then a year after that, I started talking to another girl, and I'm like, I'm gonna do it this time. I'm gonna do it right. And I held on to that for 2 years. And she walked away from me. But it was at that point that I realized I'm worthy not of the fame and the glory or the things or the stuff or the statuses. I get to be worthy of the journey that he's called me to, the journey that he put me on. I was worthy to go through those heartbreaks because he said I was. And I knew I could make it through him because he said I could. I got to be worthy. From the King of the universe all the way to little nowhere Minnesota on a Sabbath that nobody will remember, where he said, "I want to spend time with you." And that's huge. That's huge. So I guess in closing, I want to offer anybody who wants or who feels like they need the reminder, if you haven't heard already, or the chance to hear that you're worthy, because he came here so he could spend time with you. He came here so he could spend time with you, and he wants you to spend time with him. But here's the thing. Back in 2015, I think it probably was, I walked out from the Schwartz's basement where they were having worship after the service. Prayer time, amazing, it was huge, but I felt like I had to walk around. I had to get up, I had to move, like I had to do something. And I walked out onto the porch and I saw one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. I didn't see it physically, but in my spirit, I knew, and I could see it. I could see it. So real. I saw one large draping figure staring ominously and just with evil and hatred. And surrounding the building were all small draped, cloaked, foggy, smoky figures. And Yahweh brought it to me. There is an actual, this spirit is holding the cares of the world that each one of us carries. But they could not come in here because Yahweh is here. This is the house of Yahweh. They could not pass this point. They were waiting off the end of the dock, or they were waiting off the end of the porch because they could not cross that barrier. They were not able to. And I prayed that spirit. I prayed him down. I took his power away. Praise Yahweh. But those burdens I can't do anything about. Because outside there is each one of your burdens that you're going to walk back out of there to, and it's going to jump back onto you. It's going to. It's inevitable. Because we have to think about things out there. We have to deal with things. But we have the chance to not let it grab onto our shoulders and weigh us down. We could kick it off and say, hey, this is the journey of life that I'm on, but I'm worthy to do it. Because Yahweh told me I am. Doesn't matter anymore. It can grab your heel. I might drag along saying, no, please care about me again. And we got to deal with things. But there's freedom in just knowing that you're worthy because he made you that way. Not because of anything that you did. Just because he wanted a relationship with you. Ask questions. Know and recognize yourself, your own shortcomings, and find the environments, find the people that you need to know about yourself from. Because I'm kind of loath to know what Josiah would say is my biggest problem, or what Jonathan would say is my biggest problem. Because he's my brother and my peer. And I know that he's seen stuff. And that's kind of terrifying because I don't want to know. But if I can grow, why not? And I know I don't want to take their information. But if I could take that humility and say, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not all that in a bag of chips. And the last takeaway I would say is we need to gain a new perspective on Yahweh. Not from the standpoint of our truth. This is my truth. No, from his truth. We don't know enough about him. To me, my biggest three are he is my father. And I can take that as my father. He is Yahweh. He is Yahweh. And he is the King of the universe. That's bigger than anything, because that puts me in perspective of myself. To say, I am nothing but what he makes of me, which is bigger than anything else in life. Praise Yahweh. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. Baruch Atah Yahweh. Baruch Hashem Yahweh.